Welcome to the Pitchwerks podcast. I'm Scot MacTaggart. Over the last 20 years, I've been a sales rep, a marketer, a manager, an executive, a consultant, and an advisor. This show is designed to give you access to my list of contacts so that you can learn more about how to present your ideas at work and succeed in your career.
Startups and salespeople, marketers and managers from the Epicast network in Pittsburgh. It's the Pitchwerks podcast.
Look, it's about people's lives that we're talking about here, right? So when you think about that and you think about the notion, the impetus for us to really reinvent the future of healthcare, rethink and innovate, without any boundaries, without, really challenge the status quo, right? I think about it in terms of, look, innovation, if done right, will make technology invisible.
Hey everybody, it's Scott. It is Wednesday. Welcome back to your Pitchwerks podcast. Unless this is the first time you're tuning in, which, you know what, that's cool. We got a big guest this week. I get it. It's all right. Take an opportunity now and hit the subscribe button if that's the case, though. You'll get the show on Wednesdays a little bit earlier than everybody else. It's just one more commute that you can, potentially listen to this fine program on as you're, going out there and checking the things off your podcast to-do list. So yeah, big guests. Very important information this week. Rasu Shrestha. He's an MD. He's an MBA, and he has just a ton of insight into what a lot of you want to know. And we can't thank him enough for coming in. It's a really big deal that he would come in and essentially tell us, like, this is how we take pitches. This is what is happening over here. This is how we think of healthcare. This is what the future looks like from our perspective. So I think you're really going to like this week's episode. You might want to grab a notepad. There's going to be some things you're going to want to come back to. All right, let's jump in. Thank you so very much for coming in. Rasu Shrestha, you're a doctor, you're an MBA, and here you are for some reason slumming in my studio. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. I love this. You've got some cool digs here.
I've got cooler friends, and that's who makes this all happen. As I understand it, you play a dual role, right? Mm-hmm. At UPMC, mm-hmm. which is the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, we have people all over the world, so sometimes I have to explain this, right? This is the largest employer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and PA is not a small state. No. And then UPMC Enterprises, which is a related sort of, I guess the easiest way to say it is that you're looking towards the future at UPMC Enterprises, and you're involved in leadership in both of those organizations. Kind of, if you would, just sort of let people know what your role is on a day-to-day basis.
Sure, yeah. So you're right, physician by background, radiologist actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Got tired of treating just a series of images at a time, and said, all right, I think there's more that we can do to really impact the lives of patients at scale, right? Yeah. And so almost about 20 years ago when I'd done my informatics training was when I sort of dove headfirst into this area of healthcare, informatics, and innovation, and I haven't looked back since then. I've been here in Pittsburgh for about 10 years. Okay. Moved from sunny Los Angeles to...
It is quite sunny by comparison.
That's right. To not so sunny Pittsburgh, but beautiful nonetheless. And
beautiful largely because of its people, right?
Yeah, and the city too. I mean, you got to hand it to Pittsburgh.
I'm not saying it's ugly. I'm just saying it's hard to compete with 70 degrees and sunny.
Well, that is true. The proximity to the beach and the predictably good weather, it does get tiring after a while. Mm-hmm. I'm just kidding.
No, I knew I wasn't going to fall for that one.
That's right. So I moved here about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And my roles continue to evolve over time. I'm currently charged with innovation for UPMC. I'm the chief innovation officer for this payer provider organization, meaning we're providing care with hospitals, with physicians, right? 40 hospitals with thousands of physicians across the board. We also have a payer arm, a health plan, one that provides you insurance and coverage. And what's really interesting about this yin and yang of the payer and the provider is I see that as sort of the blueprint to the future of healthcare. And maybe we can get to that in a
bit later. Yeah. I mean, I hadn't honestly thought about it. I don't pretend to understand all of the moving parts in your world, but I do understand this, that innovation is not technology.
Yeah.
And I think it's likely that when people are first introduced to you, to your position, to sort of what you might be able to point to as a project, they probably conflate those two ideas, that
Yeah.
innovation is technology, technology is innovation. But what's the line? Like, how do you define innovation? Or how does UPMC define innovation when they created this role for you?
Sure. Yeah. So, charged with innovation for UPMC, that's sort of the broader role. Mm-hmm. And where I park my car every day is at Bakery Square, which is really our headquarters for UPMC Enterprises.
Which is a gorgeous facility.
Awesome facility.
It really is.
The old Nabisco factory, neighbors with Google upstairs and some really cool digs around. And just the transformation of Pittsburgh that we're seeing from Bakery Square is just absolutely remarkable. But that's where I'm the EVP for UPMC Enterprises, our innovation and entrepreneurship, our commercialization arm at UPMC. And when we ask ourselves that very question that you just brought up, sort of the difference between innovation and technology, the way that I like to think about this is, as we're sort of sitting down and looking at all of the challenges of healthcare as we know it today, because there's nothing more personal than the pursuit of excellence and innovation in healthcare, right? I mean, look, it's about people's lives that we're talking about here, right? So when you think about that and you think about the notion, the impetus for us to really reinvent the future of healthcare, rethink and innovate, without any boundaries, without, really challenge the status quo, right? I think about it in terms of, look, innovation, if done right, will make technology invisible.
Innovation, if done right, will make technology invisible. You're thinking, this is design thinking stuff now.
This is design thinking stuff, but this is also about making sure that technology doesn't really become an impediment to care. Mm-hmm. And that's So then that's actually what it's become in the last 10, 20 years that we've been embracing the digital form factor in healthcare. Is technology in large parts has become an impediment to care. 44% of the time when you end up at an ED or your primary care practitioner's office, they've got their backs to you because they're entering notes into the electronic medical record system, billing documentation, and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. Not making eye contact with you, not talking to you about what matters most to you as a human being.
You backed the whole train up into a definition of what's healthcare.
Yeah.
That's really where you took it. And
absolutely.
And I think, seriously, God love you for that, because that's, in order to define innovation, you have to define what you're innovating. Somewhere along the line, if your mind works anywhere near the way mine does, you set up a priority list and you said, okay, these are the priorities that we feel we can either A, improve the most on, or B, have the most payoff. Mm-hmm. Like, however you set your priority list, that's how you sort of divide that elephant up into bites instead of trying to swallow it at once. Is that an easier way to think of the question?
No, certainly. So, one of the biggest things that one needs to do when you're pursuing any path that involves innovation is focus, right? You absolutely have to focus, right? And for us at UPMC and UPMC Enterprises, one of the things that we did some years back was to really pull together a strategic framework that loudly defines what it is that we're doing, and by definition, what it is that we're not doing.
Yes. And
how it is that we're doing, and again, by definition, how it is that we're not doing, right? And then the focus areas, right? So we said, all right, look, healthcare is huge. It's this, $3.7 trillion industry today. Just ridiculously huge.
Which is 1,000 billions. It's so hard to get context.
Right.
Okay, so if 1 million is 1,000 thousands, mm-hmm. 1 billion is 1,000 of those, and 1 trillion is 1,000 of those, and I don't think that we can even conceive of the size of what you just said.
Correct. Yeah, 3.7 trillion, and costs continue to escalate. Right, and quality of care is still questionable despite all of the money that's going into healthcare in the United States today. Yes. Outcomes still questionable. Right. So, mm-hmm. So for us, as we're contemplating this big elephant that is healthcare, right. Back to the example earlier, what we're saying is, look, how do we make sure that we focus? And we've defined specific focus areas at UPMC Enterprises, and they're still broad. But having said that, there's this area of translational science, right? A lot of great science that happens in the...
We just had Cyvello in here.
There you go.
Yeah.
Cyvello, great partners for us at UPMC and UPMC Enterprises.
You just made me look really smart. and I can't tell you how hard that can be, right? But the translational piece,
Yeah.
I didn't even understand that was a thing until Don and Alyssa explained it to me a couple weeks ago.
Right. There you go. So that's a big area of focus for us, is the translational science component. Lots of great research that happens at the University of Pittsburgh. You're number 5 in NIH rankings. And what we're saying is, how do we take the synthesis of all of the great research work that happens in the university and translate those to companies,
right?
Translate those to technologies and solutions that will really transform the very face of healthcare. So we're focusing on things like immune transplant therapy, right? And looking at how digital assets could really move that science to the next level. Really interesting stuff there. And then in the broader realm of digital healthcare, and I pause when I use that phrase, digital health. It's like saying, all right, I'm going to go watch a digital movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough to pin down what you mean.
Right.
And therefore, it can do scope creep on you.
Right,
it can get away from you in a hurry.
Yeah, and so in that realm, however, we're focusing on clinical tools, on what we call population health. So clinical tools is looking at sort of the N of 1, right? So me as a physician and you as a patient, and the tools that I use as a clinician to provide care and better care processes to my patients. And then population health, which is not the N of 1, but the N of many, where I'm looking at population.
Got it. Like public health or managing an entire health system.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Or, a population of diabetics, or a population of patients that might be living in a certain zip code, right?
Very
Where
good.
I say, look, the zip code might be a stronger deterministic factor around health outcomes than even the genetic code.
Right.
And how do we use data to drive those decisions? So we have clinical tools, population health, we have consumer, where we're challenging the future of the current state of healthcare and saying, look, the future of healthcare is where we're moving away from the bricks and mortar hospitals to patients' homes, to their smartphones, to their pockets. Yeah. Where patients, consumers, eat, work, live, and play is where health and care actually needs to happen. And then just to finish it off, our last domain is infrastructure and business services, where we're looking at the back office functions and the delivery of healthcare, where we know that there exists so much waste in the delivery of healthcare. And if we can use artificial intelligence and machine learning and the magic that data and technology can bring to the table to transform that phase, what would that look like? So rev cycle management, supply chain management, a bunch of other things there as well.
Now that we're living lifestyles which are more tailored to our own personal preferences, we are creating new challenges for the people in healthcare. So, for example, if I am, and I'm not making positive or negative judgments on anyone here, I'm just listing the options, right? So if I am a person who does not vaccinate or does not want to follow the vaccination schedule, there is now a group, a tribe for me, and you have that sort of gathered in your big data view. You now have all of these tools which, if we were 20 years ago and people were maybe a little bit less likely to deviate from what they call the norm,
sure,
those tools would be pretty close to solving. I don't want to say solving. How about this? We'd be a lot closer to solving a lot of problems, though. But now that technology is also sort of diversifying the lifestyle choices that people make, or connecting groups of people that didn't think that they had a tribe before, we need big data. It's not like a thing that we can use now to solve problems. It's like literally it's the only way we can keep up with the diversification of lifestyle choices that people are making.
Absolutely. So it's a great question that you have there. And so 27 petabytes.
What's that?
That's the amount of data that UPMC currently has.
Wow.
And it's doubling every 18 months.
Okay, so a petabyte, if I'm right, is 1,000 terabytes, right?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure, because sometimes
yeah.
when we get into those ones
That's
I haven't
right.
used very often, it's been a bit for petabytes.
Yeah, I think you're right. So 27 petabytes, it's doubling every 18 months. And that's just the data that we currently have access to. That's in real-time storage, not offline storage.
Right, that you can call up when you need it.
Right. And it's the data from our data warehouse, electronic medical record systems. It doesn't include the imaging data.
I was just about to ask.
As an imager.
The petabytes made me think that you had an awful lot of radiology scans in there.
It actually doesn't include any of the radiology scans.
Wow.
That's in a different system altogether.
That's insane.
The reason I mention that number is when we talk about the challenges of these data silos not talking to each other. You mentioned big data, right? These data silos not talking to each other. And this is a big problem in healthcare today, with a challenge of interoperability between these electronic medical record systems that we've proliferated over the last decade plus. I challenge that and I say, look, it's not just about those petabytes worth of data that oftentimes is locked away in these silos. That's data that we currently have that's within our health systems, within those electronic medical record systems. But the patient, the consumer, doesn't live within those EMRs, within those electronic medical record systems. Where they eat, work, live, and play is at home. They may, or you know, in the playground or in the golf course, perhaps, right, in their steel mines or in their offices, and when they come and quote unquote get care from a UPMC or any institution for
like
that
they're
matter.
picking up a bag of burgers.
That's right. You know, they spend like 20 minutes, 30 minutes with their PCP. You know, they might spend longer if they have a procedure done in a couple of days maybe. And then they go home, right? And that's where life happens. So what we're really trying to push for is to say, hey, look, we talk about big data. We talk about the power of data to transform insights and get at actionable insights that might generate behavior and behavior change. And what I really want aren't just those 27 petabytes worth of data. I want data that speaks to the social determinants of healthcare, data that speaks to the zip code, data that speaks to your buying patterns, eating habits, data that speaks to things that drive and motivate you. Right? And these are data elements that we're now starting to really go after with the patient's permission, of course. The 27 petabytes worth of data is extremely useful for us with the analytics capabilities that we've brought into the table, the machine learning and artificial intelligence, and it gives us insights galore about those disease processes, about the specifics of the medication and the reactions that patient may have, or similarities across populations of patients that we're treating across the board. And
things you can prove.
Things that we can prove, things that happen within the health system, the hospital that we've defined today.
Controlled environment stuff, yeah.
Controlled environment. But my point is that that's today's definition of healthcare. When we're innovating, when we're thinking about the future of healthcare, what we're challenging the status quo at UPMC with is to say, hey, look, the future of healthcare is one that really begs for even a redefinition of the term healthcare.
I agree.
Because today, healthcare is really sick care. Because we're
break fix.
It's break fix. It's about curing an illness when you're struck with an illness.
Yeah.
Right. And I'd beg to say that the care part, not much of that is really, really happening. I mean, you know, you're coming in and we're treating you, and we're, you know, it's documentation and billing. And
yes.
And yes, at UPMC, we
careful
care.
Coding, you know.
Yeah, we care tremendously. But across the board, across the industry, healthcare is in many ways, by today's definition, a misnomer, right? And and it's really sick care. So what we really need to focus in on is health, not just illness. I think if we're able to innovate in the right direction, if we're able to really redefine healthcare will not just be about surviving, because that's what it's about today. Let's get better from an illness, and let's get the
how do we get back to work?
Back to work.
How many times is that the question?
Absolutely.
When can I work again, Doc?
Yeah. When can I get back to doing X, Y, and Z?
I only have 3 sick days, Doc.
Right. Exactly. So healthcare shouldn't just be about surviving. It should really be about thriving.
A lot of the people that listen to this show are innovators.
Yeah.
A lot of them have a startup, right? And I'm sure you've met some of them actually in your office, right? A lot of times I think about this in the same terms as the Joker from the second Batman movie, where he says, you know, I'm a dog chasing cars and I don't know what I would do if I ever caught one, right? How much time do you spend sort of reorienting people towards your actual goals is my question. Like you take a pitch, you take a presentation, you get how many LinkedIn, Rasu, I have a new technology kind of messages. Tell me what that looks like.
Yeah. So, absolutely. I mean,
let the record reflect the wistful look on your face, sir. You're like, I feel bad that some of these people are about to get called out a little bit.
No, thank goodness that I don't sleep much. And because that's what I do day in, day out, 24/7 across the board, is this process of interacting with entrepreneurs, interacting with clinicians and patients and startups and others who have brilliant ideas, who are coming to me all day long, and my team across the board. And this is where the power of the collaborative, the team, really comes to play. And I'm the front face to UPMC and UPMC Enterprises.
And you're very accessible. I've seen you at I saw you at Thrival. I saw you at how many of these things? You're not hiding.
No, absolutely. Front and center with a a strong purpose, right?
Right.
Because I want to interact with these bright individuals who are just longing to challenge the status quo, who have this one great idea that they know just needs to be materialized, needs to be born. So we're listening. We're all ears. I'm easily accessible, as you know, whether it's on social media, on Twitter, I'm just everywhere, right?
I can't believe you're here. I still mean that. I mean, thank you so much again.
Absolutely. But this is where I rely on the living lab that is UPMC. And this is the system that we've actually built at UPMC with UPMC Enterprises, is where we at Enterprises actually rely on the rest of UPMC, the subject matter experts, right? The brilliant clinicians, the scientists, the data scientists, and others across UPMC to say, hey, look, as we're vetting these opportunities, work with us. So what we do is we have a really well-defined process of vetting these ideas, and we stay in close contact with these entrepreneurs, with these startups, with the researchers and others who come to us, provide them the guidance. But we're also brutally honest with them. There are priorities. There are these focus areas that I defined earlier. There's also sort of that living lab that we actually feel those pain points in. So what we try to do first and foremost, we don't lead by pilots, because a lot of startups come to a health system and say, hey, we got to pilot.
I was going to ask that question. Honestly, is like if somebody comes to you with a pilot idea, is that new and novel, or is that kind of tired and played out?
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's kind of tired and played out now.
Pilotitis is a word. I mean, seriously.
What if they have their own setup before they get to you?
Right. Yeah.
Is that now just like, hey,
that's great.
all the better now because they didn't ask you to set it up? Really?
No, that's brilliant. That's and more data, more experience, more arrows behind their backs, scar tissue. That's all good.
Yeah,
right?
for real. Yeah, I got the marks to show that I did this.
Absolutely, that's all good. But we don't lead by a pilot. We lead by strategic alignment.
Yeah.
Right. Does this meld with those unmet clinical operational needs? Does this align with the strategic framework that I defined earlier? Mm-hmm. And the first thing that we look for really is talent, passion.
Yeah.
Does this entrepreneur, does this group of individuals in this startup, do they bring talent and passion to the table? The second thing that we look for, technology, right? Because if the technology sucks, and if the science or the technology sucks,
you have this look on your face right now, like you hate letting people down, and I understand where you're coming from. I think you, like me, like you and I both sort of prize and protect the dignity of the individual when we're in these environments. Sure. We know that they're taking the hard road.
Yeah. Startup life is hard.
Yeah, this is not easy life. But again, I have to keep thinking about that patient that we were talking about earlier. Where like, is there anything more powerful than the responsibility that I have been, tasked with? And like, I'm sorry, Joe, the entrepreneur, who has literally like not eaten a proper meal in 18 months, right? But no matter how smart and excited you are, the patients are going to suffer if I say yes to you or if I give you more access than you deserve at this point.
Absolutely. So we're saying no all day long.
You have to.
Unfortunately. I wish it was not the case, but that's the reality. The other reality, however, is for the entrepreneurs that we're talking to, the startups and these researchers, clinicians, and others that come to us, the experience of going through the vetting process, of interacting with us, we're not just saying no for no's sake.
Why would you? Yeah.
And they understand that. They enjoy the process of really sort of, going through the logic of, look, here's why it's a no at this point, or here's what we could do to potentially perhaps get this to the right place so that we could put that force field around it, as I mentioned earlier. So there's a well thought through process of how we get from point A to point B. The other thing too is we try to bring an element of I think you referenced this earlier, design thinking.
Yes.
Right. So design thinking is really important. So there's a discipline.
Let's be fair. You referenced it. You just didn't call it by name. You said the tech was getting in the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Right. So innovation, if done right, makes technology invisible was the phrase that I used earlier. So we lead by empathy.
Okay.
Right. And that's difficult because we've not done that in healthcare before. Right. All of these clinical information systems, these solutions that we're actually using today, the incumbents of healthcare as we know it today, not so much design thinking really went into the creation of those solutions. I can tell you that up front because
Right.
I was involved in sort of Gen 1, of creating those solutions myself.
We forgive you. You did great.
Yeah. But so it's not just about doing digital anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Because that was the big sort of war cry was, hey, we got to do digital. We got to move away from analog. We got to do digital. It's not about doing digital anymore, but it's about being digital. It's about thinking digitally. It's leveraging these digital assets and representing data and insights and information in ways that will really cause for behavior change to actually happen.
Okay.
Right. And so that's what we're really after. So design thinking is important. And through that process of design thinking, iterative, right? Agile, where we're nimble. You talked earlier about sort of you've got startups and you also have sort of the established groups that,
Right.
are coming to us with
with
things.
the resources to make changes quickly.
Absolutely.
And still understand the certifications
Right.
and
Right.
like what's the environment look
Yeah.
like. I mean, I have only the beginning top notes of the complexity of your environment, right?
Right.
But someone just completely separately from any preparation I was doing for our conversation started to tell me the other day about HL7, which is, I'm going to do my best to fumble through this, right? But is essentially a protocol that data is formatted into so that a lot of different systems can share the same data source, right?
Yeah.
But it's not new.
It's not.
And it's definitely not moving at the speed of the other innovations that you're bolting onto the patient experience. So now it's like, well, how do we share information that was never built into this protocol?
Yeah.
It's just one tiny, it's not even the tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely.
Because you can't see the iceberg yet. It's the beginnings of the iceberg that
Right,
you're not even aware is out there on the horizon.
Certainly. And so even with that example that you quoted, right? So with HL7, which is a standard for how systems need to sort of talk to each other and exchange information, it speaks to the complexity that exists in healthcare today. So in the midst of that complexity are startups, right?
Right.
And then in the midst of that complexity are also, as you referenced earlier, sort of the incumbents, sort of the big wigs that are out there. And
Blue chip stocks, yeah.
right, the blue chip stocks. And we're dealing with both ends of that spectrum all day long.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to push for are to say, hey, look, doesn't matter if you're this, bigwig on the right or a startup on the left. What we need in healthcare are speedboats, not Titanics.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We need speedboats. We need agile, nimble processes driven by empathy, led by design thinking, right? So agile development methodology. So there's a method to the madness. And I say this because we've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
And we have had models that have been more successful than others. We've had a lot of failures behind us. And I'm one to push for not just us at UPMC Enterprises, but really across the board, across the industry, for us to embrace our failures with pride and dignity, right? Celebrate failures. A failure is in many ways a gift.
Failure is evidence of attempt. Failure
Absolutely.
is evidence of effort.
Right.
And the absence of failure is evidence of a cover-up,
Exactly.
which means I can't trust the people that I'm now sharing a room with.
Right, you're just lying. You're just outright, blatantly lying. So failure is what's interesting about failure. We were talking about this, but what's interesting about failure is it's a gift if you realize what that failure was. If you're able to capitalize on that failure, if you're able to learn from that failure, because otherwise, then you've just failed twice.
Right.
Right. So, and that in many ways is unforgivable. So I think when you're innovating, when you're challenging the status quo, I think what you need to do in many ways, in addition to everything I just talked about earlier, is also create a safe space to fail and to fail fast. Succeed often, but fail fast. Because in healthcare, if you think about this, and I say this as a physician by background, failure is associated with bad outcomes, not so good when you're dealing with a patient
right.
on the bed, right? You don't want to fail. And absolutely you don't want to fail.
But once upon a time, we thought that people got sick because they had too much blood.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Leeches were what was available at the medical supply.
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't have medical supplies even. They literally went down to the river, right? They just like grabbed them with their hands and like, you've got too much blood.
Right.
And the next thing you know, you're sitting there willingly plugging into, this idea. We had to fail, but we failed slowly. We failed for how many hundreds of years that way?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I'm dealing with on a daily basis in pushing this innovation bedrock up the hill in this industry is...
If you're truly Sisyphus, you have to do it every single day, though.
Right. Exactly. Right. Is this culture clash, that we're dealing with. Because as we were just talking about, on one end of the clash are, physicians and researchers and professors and others who are saying, hey, look, if it's worked before, do more of it. The tried and tested methodologies, the evidence-based guidelines. That's how I was taught as a physician. Do more of it because it works. And the other end, you've got innovators and entrepreneurs and venture capital and people willing to sign big checks and saying, here's this brand new way of doing things. Trust us, it'll work.
Okay, but let me interject there, right? Because there's also courtroom thinking, right? When you're standing there trying to explain to a jury or a judge or an arbitration panel or whatever why you did what you did, it's easier if other people did it first.
Yeah,
and there's definitely that in the innovation world, right? I don't want to say that those people are wrong because I don't think they are. I think that absent better tools, absent a better mental model for how to judge what should have happened in that, like surgery suite, in that physician's office, in that ambulance, right? They go, okay, so Joe got hurt and here's what happened. And this person tried something that had never been done before, right? The CYA thinking of, well, I'm safer if I can say that 12,000 people did it before me than I am saying a venture capitalist was involved, which is almost like the Cliff's Notes version of I'm evil, because venture capital, private equity, all of these things are, often in the movies and whatnot played as being the villain, right? And those are powerful forces at work. And you are pushing the Sisyphus rock against those forces because everyone wants to make sure that they can't be blamed. I keep hearing about what malpractice insurance costs, right? And right, wrong, or indifferent, it's a fact. Maybe you want to comment on that. I don't know.
So here's the deal. So the key word here is air cover.
Yes.
I think we need to provide with data-driven insights, with these innovations that we're creating, air cover.
Very nice.
For the task at hand, the task that absolutely needs to be performed.
We're winning people over, by the way, with this air cover idea. I can feel it already.
Yeah. So that's what we need to be doing. We need to be algorithmizing those air cover protocols to provide insights at the point of care, at the point of decision making. Because healthcare, as we know it today, the sorry state of healthcare that we've gotten ourselves into today, has been driven in that courtroom thing that you were talking about earlier. Defensive medicine. Defensive medicine
is a great term for it.
Oh my goodness, right? You got to do that because I'm covering my what,
Absolutely.
And I don't want to get sued, and So how do we provide air cover to that clinician that's making that hard decision?
Yeah.
How do we make sure that we're able to provide intelligent insights using these algorithms, AI, machine learning, all these things, and help him or her make better decisions? Help him or her do the right thing for that patient that's in front of her.
And the studies are still out there when they need them.
Yeah, absolutely. So air cover, that's the magic word here.
Air cover's gorgeous. I'm going to leave this with one thing.
Sure.
And you, again, have been very gracious with your time and with making sure that people have access to sort of the recipe that works with you. So now I want to give you a small gift. And that is because, we have a certain degree of popularity with the startup and, innovation community. If you were going to ask for somebody to develop one magic bullet thing, one thing that you wish somebody would bring to you, what would that be?
Oh my. Yeah.
I can't promise we can deliver. Okay. They don't have to do what I tell them to do. They're free-willed people. It's the USA. There's so many layers to the disappointment here, but if there was one thing that maybe somebody could develop that you've been waiting to come across your desk.
Yeah, so that's a great question. It made me think for a while. So more than just one thing, what I'll say is I'll give a class of things.
Okay.
Because I think that might spur more ideas to come at us.
I really do want you to benefit from having come in here.
Thank you. Yeah, so I want people to rethink how we use data.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of talk about big data. You referenced that earlier, and if only we had access to data, if only we were able to. So move away from that, and because what I'm here to say is, look, it's not just about the data; it's about how you convert that data into knowledge and wisdom, insights that generate action.
Right.
But it's not just about insights that generate action. It's really about generating those actions to cause behavior change.
Okay.
And the way you cause behavior change, and I'm getting to my point in terms of sort of what I wish for people to really focus in on.
Russell, you can talk for 3 hours as far as I'm concerned.
So how you generate those behavior changes is through nudges. So at the end of the day, it's not really about the data. Yes, it's about the data. It's important to have data. But how do you get from data, move up that pyramid, and really get to behavior change by generating those nudges? So what I'd love for people to think more about and focus more in is how do we create those nudges, those meaningful nudges to change behavior? It doesn't have to be fancy AI algorithms with machine learning and, you've got, Alexa telling you to do things.
It feels like we're standing right near the doorstep of gamification here.
There is a lot of gamification in behavior change, right?
Yes.
It could be as simple as a text message nudge.
Yes.
Right? And we have a number of innovations that we've seen around smoking cessation, stopping smoking.
Right.
Right? Just by using the power of text messaging at the right time, right?
Very cool.
Intervening at the right time to make that behavior change. And that spectrum can go all the way, through wazoo in terms of interacting with, I mentioned AI, machine learning, blockchain, you name it. All these buzzwords that you're hearing in healthcare. Forget the buzzwords. Look at substance. Look at what it is that you're trying to do.
Tell me what happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What happens? How do you generate those nudges? How do you make those nudges meaningful and lasting and impactful? Send me those ideas. My goodness, we're all over it.
All right, guys, you got your homework. I don't know where else to take you from there. I mean, you've got the recipe for what kind of organization to be and what it is that's on Rasu's mind right now. Dr. Rasu Shrestha, he is also an MBA, which we didn't even talk about. Probably, one of the most legitimate conversations you're ever going to hear in terms of sort of where to be if you're an entrepreneur working anywhere near healthcare. Rasu, thank you so much for coming in.
Such a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, that's the end of the ride. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks to Rasu Shrestha. I can't thank you enough. I think you did a great service for our audience this week. Just all the best to you and what you're working on. And obviously, your success is our success as you continue to develop, the way that healthcare is conceived and delivered. Everybody else, find us on Pitchwerks. There's a social media extravaganza just waiting for your discovery. You will always find us under Pitchwerks. That's Pitchwerks. Yes, we know we spell it wrong. It's just going to have to be okay. If you throw a .com at the end of that, you'll be coming to the website where there is just even more stuff going on. There's even pictures. It's fantastic. I promise you, I built it myself with these own two hands. I'll catch you next week. Make sure you tune in. Another big guest, and we're looking forward to seeing you there.
The Pitchwerks podcast comes to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a production of the Epicast Network and MacTaggart, LLC. Engineering and production by Buzzy Torek and Nick Miller. For more information, show feedback, and ad sales, visit pitchwerks.com. pitchwerks.com. On social media, find and follow the show on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram using that same brand name, Pitchwerks.